Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I'm joined by an incredible guest today who is amazingly accomplished in the corporate world, in the personal development world, in the HR world. This is someone who understands at his core how to get the best out of human beings, which is me and you and every single entrepreneur and business leader out there. So we're going to learn a lot. Our eyes are going to be so open by today's guest. His name is Mario Barge. Mario is a highly accomplished HR executive with over 20 years of experience. Check out these levels at Fortune 25, Fortune 100 in private equity-backed companies across a multitude of industries, leveraging his license as an attorney. Yes, he also has a legal background. Mario has worked with CEOs and C-suite executives with a focus on addressing their ever-changing needs. Mario has helped business owners, executives, leaders, and professionals move from great to extraordinary through his successful coaching approach. His work with companies has improved their retention, succession, and engagements results. He's been recognized in 2022 for the Leadership Excellence in Healthcare Award. Mario has an extensive background that includes the following areas of expertise: culture and engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion, executive business and performance coaching, life coaching, so much on this guy's list. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Mario Barge. All right, Mario, I'm so excited that you're here with us today. Welcome to the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Hey, thanks. Great to be here. Hello.
Heck yeah. And I always love giving the floor to guests at the beginning of these episodes because I obviously introduce readers to your bio or listeners to your bio, but they love hearing your short version of your story. How the heck did you get into all this? Especially you, someone who's so accomplished in so many different areas. Give us your background.
So the short version is that I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a family of four. I have an older brother. Spent my formative years as an athlete. I did public speaking. Yes, I did public speaking in grade school. Yeah, kind of a nerd. I went to Dartmouth for college. I went to Lewis and Clark for law school. I thought that I wanted to be an attorney. I thought that I wanted to practice law. But I was introduced to human resources coming right out of law school, and I really never looked back. I mean, I have focused in that area. I spent 18 years at Nationwide, and then I moved to Centene Corporation, and then I moved to Unified Women's Healthcare. But I spent the bulk of my career at Nationwide. My background is chiefly focused in the HR space. I do leverage my legal knowledge to help our clients solve their people challenges. When it comes to my corporate career, that really centered around the insurance, financial services, and healthcare realms. But our firm, Geneva Executive Partners, doesn't limit itself to one industry. We pride ourselves on spending time with every client, building our relationship with them, understanding their business, and really tailoring our solutions so that they're rooted in the best practices that are done by all my peers out there in the HR world. When I think about any other aspects of what's brought me here, I would say it's been the mentorship that I've been fortunate to have from a multitude of leaders. And that's how I'm here today.
Yeah, Mario, I love that overview, especially because what caught my eye as we were researching you to bring you here on the show is it's not always a combination that we see. It's no small commitment to go to law school and to become a lawyer. And so transitioning right out of the gates into HR, I'm super curious to hear your perspectives. I'm sure there were aspects of law that gave you a very unique perspective on the world of HR and the world of people problems. Talk to us about some of those parallels that you saw.
So what I will say is that I went to law school actually to work in a law firm, do that standard way of practicing law. And I got into employment law. I got into labor law. I actually had a pretty amazing mentor named Corbett Gordon. She had a solo practice, and then she grew that practice. She actually argued in front of the United States Supreme Court in a very important ADA case, Albertson's case. She's a dynamic woman, amazing woman, and she was one of the biggest influences for me. I got into really understanding labor and employment law, And as I was finishing law school and looking towards what I could do next, I wanted to get into the preventative side of the legal realm. So being in a company allowed me to help prevent lawsuits from ever occurring by creating the right practices, the right policies, the right guidelines, the right approaches that actually position a company to never have to go down the road of a lawsuit because they're doing things the right way.
Yeah. It's funny when I think about, obviously you talked about preventing lawsuits. That's one element of law that we don't always think about. We think about the actual lawsuits themselves. And it also leads me into when we transition, talking about your HR, I can kind of see that bridge there where it's so much of your messaging with your own company, Geneva Executive Partners, is that you always talk about helping people, one, address their challenges, and two, reach their goals. And Mario, I can't help but think us as idealistic entrepreneurs, we always think about our goals. We don't often think about the problems that are likely to arise, the obstacles that are likely to arise along the way. What are some of those obstacles that you've seen and you've helped executives work through?
You know, I would say there's a couple things. So when you think about a small business or you think about an entrepreneur, usually we're starting just us. Maybe it's us and a couple people. And we're really just grinding and working very hard to achieve whatever it is. Usually it's growing our business and growing our business and growing our business, getting as much revenue, getting as much cash, those types of things. So focusing on people is not, naturally a revenue generating function. The people function, the HR function, a lot of people see that as a drain on the revenue. However, one of the most important assets, one of the most important investments that any entrepreneur makes is in their people. Hiring their people, making sure they're developed, making sure that they have what they need. When I get into conversations with business owners, with executives, and we start to really break down what's causing the issues, whether it's a challenge with regard to how a leader is handling their team, or it is someone who's kind of standing in their own way. They're great. They have all this technical knowledge. They're capable of doing so many things. However, they have this challenge or that challenge. It comes back to this whole notion of how are we cultivating our talent? How are we hiring our talent? How are we bringing them into an organization? How are we developing them in order for them to be successful? Because the talent does the work. The talent leads the teams. The talent comes up with the ideas. The talent does all of these things. If you don't invest in the talent, you're only going to have a pretty short shelf life as a company.
Yeah, I want to go a little deeper into that because I love how frequently you use the word develop. We want to develop our talent. We want to develop our people because obviously our ultimate goal is to develop our business, but these things go hand in hand. What does that development of people, of team members, of employees, what does that actually look like? And how do we gauge that success? What are we developing them towards?
Sure. So when you're thinking about developing your people, usually you're starting from a place of having a goal or having objectives that need to be accomplished, whether it is to have a 5% increase in your revenue, or it is to improve your retention by 5 percentage points or 10 percentage points. In order to do that, you have to then take the next step and say, what's affecting our retention? What's affecting our revenue? What has been beneficial to us over time? So the first step is really understanding the financials, understanding the business results, and how those tie back to what's happening on a day-to-day basis in the organization. And that's a pretty extensive process in order to do that. Once you get down into that data and you understand what you're dealing with, then you can actually start looking at what are the competencies or what are the skills that people are really effective at, or what are the ones that they need to improve upon. So for example, you may have a leader who has a real challenge with communication, and they may not be the most strategic person. They may be really, really strong tactically. So when you identify areas that they need to focus on, then you can get into really putting together a development plan, looking at doing some assessments, taking some information from that, looking at getting a coach for that individual who spends 3, 6, 9 months with that person to really work on those aspects so that that individual owns what needs to happen, that individual is fully invested in what needs to happen in order to move themselves forward, and you have very clear expectations around what that person needs to do. I found the most successful approach is to tie it back to compensation. So you tie back to how that person is paid with regard to how successful they are with accomplishing the goals. So that gives another incentive for that person to focus on the needs.
Mario, I'm going to tell you this, and we're going to dive into this topic in just a second before I call one thing out, but we've never talked about compensation options and different mechanisms that we can use to incentivize our team members here on the show, which is wild, over 700 episodes in. So I definitely want to pick your brain about that. But for listeners, the first thing that I want to call out, and the answer that Mario just gave us, is I think it's so brilliant the way that Mario says, hey, let's first start with our business goals and our business metrics. Without those goals, we don't have that North Star that we can work towards. And so that's what I want to. I just want to call out for listeners that having a goal is great, but having a goal that gives you something actionable to make decisions on, that's the level of intentionality that someone like Mario has made a career out of his brilliance in that regard. So I think it's really important for us as entrepreneurs to tie those goals to actual actions. Now, Mario, now that we've got that, we've got to talk about compensation, because I think it's fascinating to hear you talk about using it as an incentive. We all know that money is obviously a very powerful incentive amongst all humans, but what are some of those clever ways or creative ways or effective ways that you've seen compensation tied to incentives?
I actually like to keep it very simple. So, you have a salary, you have a bonus that the person can get. The bonus is tied to the business achieving certain financial targets, certain financial results, in order to be able to have a pool, basically, of money, if you will, to be able to then pay the bonuses. Another component that you can tie it to is actual tangible results. So if, for example, you have a t-shirt company, then you're selling shirts and sweatshirts and things of that nature, and you want to incentivize your folks to do a better job, you can tie it to the total number of t-shirts that they sell on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis. You can break it down into those types of numbers. The other piece that you can do, and this is a little bit different, is you can provide them with time off. You can provide people with the opportunity to actually earn time through actions that they take. Another thing that I actually really like to do, and it's not necessarily financially putting money in someone's hand, but it's giving them the power to be able to say, hey, this is what's important to me from an incentive standpoint, is to ask your employees what would actually be really beneficial to you? What would you really enjoy as an incentive? Because we have this really big initiative coming up. We have this really big thing that we're going to do this quarter, and what would really be good for you. And so you can take their thoughts. So then when you come back with the incentive, they're actually hearing from you what actually they said was important to them. So they feel like you're listening to them as well.
Yeah, I love that, because Mario, we as entrepreneurs, we love coming up with answers, but so often we can just ask our customers, ask our employees, let them provide the answers most relevant to them. Obviously, so much of this work that we're talking about here today, and so much that's prevalent in your business, is that retention rate. You've already brought it up a couple of times here in today's session, and going back to your experience as a lawyer, thinking about how do I prevent lawsuits before they actually happen? Mario, how do we prevent people leaving? Because understanding why people are leaving is one thing, but preventing them from leaving, that's the most important thing. What sort of, is it quarterly check-ins, monthly check-ins, weekly check-ins? Is it part of these incentives? Obviously, it's a combination of all these things, but from your perspective, what are those ways that we can prevent people from leaving?
Sure. I like to say that the first customer of your business is your employee. Sure, you're trying to attract a customer, trying to sell something to someone, but the first person that you're really trying to sell on what you're doing is a person that comes to work for you. And the way you do that is you have a value proposition of who you are from a culture, from a values, from a mission perspective that actually gets your folks to be committed to what you're trying to do as a company. From there, you then tie those values, that mission, into what they do. You tie that into their job. You tie that into how you onboard them into the company. So as the person is coming into your company, as they're coming into your business, they are rooted in who you are and they believe in who you are. Also, it's important that they don't just come there for a job. Have them come there for a career. When you have a career is a longer period of time. It's actually over time you develop a career. A job is something you go to and you leave. So when you have someone who has the mindset, the psychology that they are actually committed and they have a long time that they're going to be with you to build their career, then your ability to retain them is better. And as they go through their work and you have the steps in place to be able to develop them, to check in with them. Sure, you can do one-on-ones every 2 weeks. You can have staff meetings once a month. You can have quarterly check-ins as an overall organization where you bring everybody together. You can do stand-up meetings. You can do all these different things. But when you ask people how things are going, and they tell you that something's broken, or they tell you that something's not working well, you need to listen to them. Don't explain away the issues. Don't ignore the issues, because if you do ignore the issues, if you try to explain them away, they'll feel like they're not heard, and they will go somewhere else where they feel people will listen to them.
Yeah, Mario, so much hearing you talk about that. It really just reminds me how much of this is just relationships. We have a tendency to talk about HR and talk about teams and hiring and all of these things within the context of business. But at the end of the day, what you're talking about is just genuine human to human relationships. And that's where I'm sure engagement comes into play in the course of your work. I want to talk a little bit about that engagement, because for me, as someone whose team has been growing, especially over the past few years, I know my style as a business leader, and that is entrepreneurial. Obviously, we're here on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. I love having entrepreneurial spirits on my different teams. And with that, I empower my employees a lot. That's kind of my leadership style, is I trust them fully. Otherwise, I wouldn't hire them to begin with. What sort of ways can we see to build that? Whether it is that entrepreneurial spirit, the empowerment that we give our employees, what are other mechanisms that we can give to really make them feel, you said it, it's a career, not just a job. How can we make them feel like they're part of that team?
Well, I think there's a couple things you can do. So when you have your team start, when you have your individual start, you can have, we call it a buddy. So you can have somebody who's already there, who's already versed in what you do as a business, to kind of help bring that person along. I also think it's really important to get that person involved in, initiatives that are important to the business, that actually move the business forward. So they feel like they're contributing in a way that actually helps the business. If you have work that they need to do that's kind of like rote day-to-day work, it's important that you add into that things that are much more challenging, that are going to stretch them. It's a little hard sometimes to do that because you don't know if they can handle it. You don't know if they can do it. But the best thing you can do is you can give them the opportunity and then use those opportunities when they maybe don't do something the way that they should, or where they need some help, to train them, to teach them. One of the best gifts I feel that we can give an employee is confidence. And you only build confidence by giving people more and then helping them understand when something didn't go well, versus using that as an opportunity to discipline them.
Yeah, obviously that is there's a fine line in what you're talking about now when it comes to training, discipline, all of that. Talk to us a little bit more about that, because I don't even know how to pose the right question there, because obviously it is important that we have people performing optimally and to our business's standards. But on the flip side, you're right. It is about developing them. It is about nurturing is the other verb that I want to use there. Mario, how do we handle that aspect of the world?
The way I would describe it is, you hired this person for a reason. You want them to be successful. If they are displaying behaviors, performance, maybe some attendance challenges, you should approach it from the perspective of support, working with them to understand what's not working well and to work with them to improve it. It should always be from a support position. It shouldn't be from a punitive position. As you go through those conversations, you should document those conversations. You should document the date, the time, all those types of things. You should have that information set aside so that you can look back on it as you go through the year to see how they have performed as you go. If the performance continues to be a challenge, then you have more conversations. You should have a formal approach to documenting those conversations with expectations that you clearly lay out. So the key is starting from a supportive place, because when you hire someone, you want to build a relationship with that employee. You want them to be successful, because that helps you be successful, helps everyone be successful. So you want to always come from a place of preserving the relationship, nurturing the relationship, and you can do that by doing it in a fashion that's supportive. I always tell folks, if you feel like you're going to have a conversation that is going to have emotion, where you're going to be upset or you're going to be, angry or anything like that, don't have the conversation. Don't have it. You should never have a conversation with emotion, because that distracts from the message you're trying to give. You want the person to hear you. You want them to understand. And they're not going to really be able to do that if you have all this emotion that's also coming at them. They'll fixate on the emotion. Your message will be lost, and the opportunity won't be there any longer.
Whoa, Mario, that is extraordinarily profound advice here on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. That is very simple, but probably the most difficult piece of advice you could have given us here on today's show. And I love the way that you positioned it, is that the emotion is the thing that will get the attention, whereas it's actually the conversation, the substance, the message that we want to get it. So yeah, it's a distraction there. I love the way you talk about that. Part of me looks at your ability to navigate these tricky, complex human issues. And part of me thinks that so much of your approach and your brilliance comes from, obviously, you are also a coach. And I'm super curious to hear about your perspective as a coach. What principles from coaching? Obviously, you've done a lot of deep work there. You've helped people in so many different ways, whether it's business or life. What coaching principles do you find that really help us as leaders, as business people, as bosses, as heck, just people?
I would say that the fundamental understanding of what coaching is. Coaching is about helping someone solve their own problems. It's not about giving them the solution. It's not about telling them what to do. It's about helping them find their path, helping them navigate that path, and helping them identify the solutions. So the approach that I've taken with a lot of leaders is to listen to them, to listen to what they say, and to listen to what they don't say, to pay attention to their nonverbals, to pay attention to what's important to them, how they make decisions, to observe their judgment. Those things help give me a picture of who they are and how they need to move forward. Now, as a coach, it's a little different than a consultant. A consultant is brought in to provide a initiative, to develop a program, to do things of that nature. So you're actually coming in to actually fix something or to help them move something forward. A coach is coming in to work side by side with someone. I call it walking with that person. So you walk alongside them as they go down their path, and you help them with the direction that they head. So to me, coaching is not so much about trying to solve someone's problem by telling them what to do. It's by helping them unlock, what's inside, which is why we say we take them from great to extraordinary.
Yeah, I love the visuals. As a visual person, when you talk about walking side by side with someone, that's something that we all want to feel in our lives, in our business journeys, in our relationship journeys, everywhere. We want that person to walk side by side with us. And it makes me think about all the different things with regards to business and life. Obviously, there's so many parallels there. And I really have come to appreciate how much of your work blends the two, because you understand that, hey, a lot of people problems are not confined to the walls of your business or the walls of your career, that they also incorporate life problems. Mario, walk us through that navigational waters, because as a business leader myself, and you are also a business owner yourself, we have to also consider that not only do our lives impact our work, but our employees' personal lives also impact their work. How do we navigate those waters?
I would say it's the best way I would put it is you have to keep it very simple. So the way that I've tended to do it is I get to know my people, and sometimes I will just contact them and say, hey, how's it going? How are things going? How's your family? And that's the extent of the conversation. It's not a conversation about business. It's not a conversation about any of that. It's a conversation about them. So I think you have to be very deliberate about your choices with regard to communicating with your folks. I think you have to make time to build that relationship. And when you do that, you have to be able to listen to them and to hear what they have to say. Sometimes people just want to share. Other times, they don't want to tell you a thing about what's going on in their family. And that's fine too. You have to give them room to be who they are. And then you have to give them room to share with you in a way that makes them feel comfortable. Now, sometimes people may tell you too much. They may share lots of things about their personal lives, but it's because they needed to do that. And so being there to be able to support them, is important. I worked with someone in the past, and we worked on a part of the organization that did threat assessment. So where people would say that they're going to harm someone or they're going to do something bad or those types of things. So we would actually be the group that would be asked to review those issues and work through them, de-escalate threats and things like that. And the individual said in the meeting, I don't think it's our job to manage their personal lives. And he was right. It's not anyone's job to manage the personal life of an employee. But employees don't ever ask their direct leader, business owner, CEO, they don't ask them to manage their life. Employees don't necessarily even want someone to be in their business, but knowing that they have someone that cares about them goes a long way, and it matters quite a bit to people.
Yeah, for sure. It's so much of our conversation today really just keeps coming back to those people relationships. If you hire people, it's such a common saying in the world of business, if you have people involved, you're going to have people problems. And understanding, Mario, you're really highlighting for us the simplicities of dealing with people, but also the complexities and how we have to balance both of those. The one thing I promised you before we hit record today is that time is going to fly. And as we come towards the end of today's session, I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to squeeze a little bit more brilliance out of you here today. And I want to talk about change, because so much of your career is you've worked at all different levels of business. And I think the one thing that's consistent across all businesses is change is inevitable. And it's part of your services, change management. I'm going to read from your website, actually. We'll point listeners to your website at the end of this session. But right on your website, you wrote, change is always present. The best organizations lean in, embrace it, and don't let it be a disruptor. Mario, give us your perspectives. Having seen all the different levels of business, all the different people problems that come with it, the strategy that's intertwined through all of that. What is it about change? What is it that people struggle with when it comes to change, and how can we successfully navigate through that change?
Sure. So it's very common. Like if we think about our brains, we become used to what we do. The more we do it, the more it becomes, part of who we are, muscle memory. It's the same as if you drive yourself to a same place every single day, or you walk the same path, or you lift weights, or whatever it is. Change disrupts that. Change throws all of that up in the air. You don't take that road anymore, you take this road. You start a new workout regimen, your body's sore. You don't get the amount of sleep that you normally get, and you're cranky. So in order to be able to understand change in the business context, you have to be able to understand that it's happening, and you have to plan for it. So as an organization, probably one of the worst things you can do is to say, we're going to change this thing that we've been doing for the last 5 years, and we're going to change it tomorrow, and we'll just send an email out to everybody. People are going to have all kinds of feelings about that, whether it affects what they do in their job, whether it affects how they get to work, whether it affects what their options are to eat, whatever it is. So you have to be very thoughtful about how you approach change. So you have to think about it as a leader. You have to think about what the impacts are. You have to think about whether it impacts people in their jobs. You have to think about whether it impacts people with regard to how they actually go about doing their work, like getting to work and the resources they use and things like that. And then you have to think about what's the best plan to be able to address those challenges so that the change doesn't impact them quite so much. It's going to impact them. You should be transparent about that, but you should also be transparent about what you've done to try and prepare for the change, and that the change will be over time so that they understand this is something they'll be going through. If you don't take those steps, then instead of you trying to guide and direct the change actually guides you. And that's not a position you want to be in.
Yeah, I'm going to call this out for listeners right here, because Mario, you said this word like 4 or 5 times in that answer, and that is plan. Listeners, you see, it's the word I'm going to keep using about Mario and his work, is how intentional he is here. He's talking about having a plan for change, and all those different things he just listed right in front of our very eyes about how many different things we need to plan for, we need to anticipate. That is such an important part for us as business leaders, as executives, as team leaders, wherever you are in your entrepreneurial entrepreneurial or wantrepreneur journey, all of these things are directly relevant and a big challenge from Mario to us here today. Mario, the last thing, I can't let you go today without hearing, because it really stuck in my mind the way you visualize the role of a coach for us, walking side by side with someone. I'm super curious to hear, because you're obviously an awesome leader. I'm super curious to hear your perspectives on what is a leader. There's so many different roles that a leader plays, but to you, what is a leader? What is leadership?
Well, I would say, first of all, a leader is someone who's very privileged. It's someone who's been put in a position to be able to guide other individuals down a road, down a path. And I think that, a leader is somebody who asks questions, is willing to learn, and is willing to listen. Leaders have to have resilience and self-awareness, and they have to have all these great skills. But I think at the root of it, they need to be open, and they need to be able to hear what people have to say. When I was younger, I was told that I asked too many questions. I was told that, you ask too many questions, you're always asking questions. And, now older version of me looks at that and thinks, I don't think that's really possible. Sure, you can ask a lot of questions, but I would say you want to make sure that the questions are purposeful. You want to make sure that they lead to an end. But if you're just asking questions to ask, then that obviously wastes time. You should ask questions to learn. And I think leaders who are willing to learn are the best leaders, in my opinion.
Yes, amen to that. It's something I said a little bit earlier in our session today, is that we always think we need to be the people who have all the answers. But Mario, so much of your work comes back to being inquisitive, being curious, and listening, because those around us are the ones who can provide the most actionable answers for us. So I love those perspectives. Mario, I also love giving my guests the hard part of every episode, which is somehow summarizing with all these different things that we talked about. What's an actionable takeaway that you hope every person, whether they're wantrepreneurs, they're still in those 9-to-5 journeys, preparing for, developing towards their entrepreneurial journeys, or those entrepreneurs out there running 10K a month businesses, 7-figure businesses that we've got listeners of, what do you want to see every single person do from here?
So what I would say is, if you have a team of people, one of the best things that you can do is what's called stay interviewing. Stay interviewing is a very simple and effective way to understand where your people are, how they feel, what will cause them to leave, and why they stay. It's very simple. It's a series of questions that you ask them. You can do it on a quarterly basis. You can do it every couple of months, but the information is priceless. It's information that lets you know very, very valuable points with regard to what's important to them. And I specifically tell my clients, ask them why they stay. Ask them what would cause them to leave. Once you get that information from the individual, use that information to their benefit and to your benefit as a company. If you don't do anything with the information, then you've engaged in a hollow exercise. If you do something with the information, it's very helpful for you. It's a great way for you to measure satisfaction, and it's a great way for you to retain your people.
Wow, Mario, I love that that's where you took that final bit of advice. It almost feels scary to ask our team members those questions, but you're right. That is such valuable insight that only they can give us. Truly, only they can give it to us first person. So I love that. Mario, you've got such level-headed brilliance with regards to all of these things. Obviously, you're gleaning off of so many years of experience in all of this. I'm sure listeners are going to be keen to check out more of your work online, because I feel like we only scratched the tip of the iceberg in your genius here today. So drop those links on us. Tell listeners where they can go to learn more about you and the awesome work that you're doing with your company.
Sure. So there's really kind of two primary places where you can contact us. One is through our website, which is www.genevaexecutivepartners.com. Or you can find us on LinkedIn at Geneva Executive Partners. You can also find my profile on LinkedIn under Mario Barge as well. So 3 very simple places to find us. We're also on Instagram and Facebook as well under the same names.
Yes, super easy. And listeners, you already know the drill. We want to make it as easy as possible for you to find Mario himself on LinkedIn, connect with him, drop him a line, thank him for sharing so much of his wisdom here today, as well as his business website is GenevaExecutivePartners.com. You'll find those links down below wherever it is that you're tuning in. Otherwise, Mario, thank you so much for joining us here today and being so generous with your experiences, your wisdom, your knowledge, your perspective on all things people, business, growth, and development here on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. Great to be here.